Good day, and welcome to the fifth podcast that my daughter and I have done. We're taking some time out of our busy schedules to record this, and because we couldn't get together person to person, we're doing this through a Skype machine. So please apologize for the recording. All I can say is that you should be able to hear us both clearly, and that should be fine. But yes, it's going to sound a little hollow. I'm still in front of the mic, but my daughter is coming through online. Say hello.
Hi guys, I'll do my best to be as clear as possible.
They're just,
I'm operating on a gaming mic instead of a microphone, so we'll just make the best we can of it, but we promise the conversation will still be good.
yeah, Skype said that your microphone was too boss for the system.
Yeah, it won't read everything and it won't let me adjust everything. So
We got some really good comments back from the people who heard our last podcast. They said that they really liked us talking about the difficulties of being a DM and about the uh, truth we said about reality not being as good as fantasy. So that was good positive stuff. Did you have any last thoughts about the last podcast?
actually no, I just really enjoyed it. I'm glad anybody could hear it. It was a pretty rough environment to record in, but we all enjoyed talking about reality versus things that are handed to you and how much we prefer faux reality. And now faux reality has become a happy in joke amongst my players and friends.
I feel right now in my life that I am eternally moving from fantasy landscape to fantasy landscape. I'm either in the fantasy landscape of designing my world, or when I'm playing it, then I'm introducing it that way, or I'm telling other people how to make their fantasy landscapes on their blogs, or I'm writing my book, which is just one more fantasy landscape. So sometimes it really feels like the real world just doesn't have any impact or relationship to me. And I'm fine with that. I go out into the world and I do some sort of temporary job or task or something that takes me a couple of days, or I get something, like the restaurant job that I had. And it's just weird to talk to normal people and be around normal people. I think I am really built to do what a lot of the past geniuses and so on and so forth through history, and just put everything aside and hide out in their rooms for the rest of their lives.
Well, the real world is like jogging now. I only participate when I actively want to. I don't have to do the real world. I just should occasionally.
I just can't figure out why I should, I mean, I suppose that there's something to be said for being disconnected, but I used to be really connected with the real world all the time. And I think I just got to the point where it ceased to have anything left to teach me. Just seems a lot of boring now.
I only have to stay engaged because when you make hats for a living, you're going to start making some weird stuff if you don't at least partake in people a little bit. So you have to make sure that you're not suddenly making sombreros in Canada.
I suppose so, yeah. Well, we should come around to D&D. I thought we might talk about scarcity. I have, in the last month, I had been talking a lot about trade systems, and I have been repeating the mantra over and over: make things difficult for your players to buy because scarcity drives adventure. And I thought we would talk about that.
Oh, absolutely. You need equipment.
But it's
And if you can buy the equipment, especially if you can buy the best equipment, why would you go into a dungeon? What would be the purpose?
Well, buying the best equipment, buying people who are free to buy magic, which just completely baffles me that you can go into a store and buy a bunch of potions. I was watching a video online of an online campaign. Uh, critical Critical Role was the campaign, and they were talking about, well, we're going into the dungeons. Let's go to the market and buy some potions, and that just baffles me.
I suppose the closest thing we get in our game is healing self, but even then, they're so expensive and there's very few of them
And they
at a
don't do that
time.
much.
But that's not like a mega healing potion or something ridiculous. That's That's 1d4 a worth of hit points.
Well, if you can buy a healing potion, obviously you can buy a fire giant control potion, and you can buy a speed potion, and you can buy a treasure finding potion, and I mean, where does the limit lie? I mean, why can I buy, say, this potion that will let me heal, but I can't buy a potion that will let me control the red dragon that we're going to fight?
I think a lot of it has to do with understanding on a much clearer level potion creation. Because if I'm a 12th level mage and I decide to make a fire giant control potion, if I do sell it, and the question is why, but if I did, it would have to be somewhere large, and it would have to be for a very high price because it would have been a lot of effort to make it. And why would there ever be more than one available? Why would I have made it to sell it? It's just too strange, right? It's too bizarre. If you made a fire giant control potion, I could see perhaps on some very rare circumstances that you might find one in a shop. But this would be a moment of desperation that somebody sold it because they needed to really move. Not, it's worth so much more to trade it or to lobby it.
I'm not sure what you're saying, though. Okay, you're saying that the fire giant potion is really, really hard to make and should be really, really expensive and shouldn't be available, but healing potions are okay because they're
Well,
not really hard to make and so on. That you're saying that they should be able to go buy healing potions. And if that's true, then I want to know, does a Sweetwater potion come under the healing potion or under the fire giant? And how about treasure finding? Is that really hard to make or not? Because there are no rules for how these things are made. So now we're in a situation where the DM is deciding ad hoc, oh, you can buy this potion, but you can't buy that potion.
what are healing cells made of in your world?
Oh, I can actually point it out to you. Okay, they're made from medicinal herbs that turn up on the in
But they're
the
non-magical.
description. Well, the medicinal herbs themselves turn up because the encyclopedia that I am making my trade system from refers to this place in France or this place in Russia or this place in some other part of the world making either drugs or medicinal
But they are
herbs or something. So I'm
non-magical.
not deciding where these things are made. The encyclopedia is, and if the encyclopedia says pharmaceuticals because it's describing a 1952 world, then I write in medicinal herbs on my trade system, and that tells. Okay, so you take those medicinal herbs and then you assume you're in a D&D world, and those medicinal herbs are transformed into something that's a little bit more powerful than a normal drug that we would take, but not that much more powerful. Uh,
Again, non-magical.
well, they are magical, though. Okay, I mean they react with magic, but they're kind of a low-level magic. They are to a potion. They are equivalent as a cantrip would be to a spell.
And in the environment I play now, if you go into a town and you're looking to get a cantrip done, it's not that hard. If you're looking to get a raise dead spell, you're going to have to find somebody in town of equivalent level who has a raise dead spell to give away.
Well, I'm accepting the healing salve idea because they only heal 1 to 4 hit points.
Mm-hmm.
They heal so few hit points that they're not a big potion that you're taking in advance. And on one level, I don't mind healing potions. The original game, the healing potion is so weak it doesn't really matter anyway. But if you're going to say we're buying potions, then where do you say you can buy these potions, but those potions? Where do you draw that line?
Well, I think for me, it's really about justifying why that potion would be available, which is important, and the level of how people would want it. If you had a fire giant control potion and people, it was there to buy and you were somewhere, wouldn't you think someone else would buy it?
Well, I would think that the local lords and so on and so forth of the
it would all just
of the
feed up to
territory
them.
would just sequester it, right?
Yeah,
There are
exactly.
just weapons that you cannot buy legally online because the army wants to have them in their possession and they don't want you to have them.
Well, that's it. It's a much higher item that even if somebody did sell it to a local shopkeep, and I've seen that in games where somebody sells a potion because they're desperate for money, the shopkeep is going to take the opportunity to give it to somebody higher level, not higher level, higher up, to earn favor. That makes obvious sense, at least to me.
Keeping in the in-game argument, the healing salve I see as being made sort of by a kind of a common low person who doesn't have a lot of resources, but they do know the right herbs to find in the forest, or they do know the right methods, or they've had a little bit of training and so on and so forth. But so you're buying this healing salve from the local hag that lives out near the trees near town, and you're going out there, and she's got a very small operation where she's got a cauldron and a few other things, okay?
Mm-hmm.
But the cleric who's churning out 50, 60, 70 healing potions at a batch, okay? He's got a place in town, he's got a castle, he's got a laboratory, he's got help, he's got aid, and he's well known to everybody. He's not just some person that's out in the woods. This is a guy who's really part of the institution. And to me, the army would be saying, every one of the healing cells that you're producing, those are ours. You can't sell them to anybody. Those are ours. We're already buying them ahead of time from you. We're supporting you. You're part of the community. So, you know, you have no reason to sell them to anybody because we've already bought every last one of them.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be the way that they would control the supply.
And that makes perfect sense, at least to me.
But out of game, like, stepping out of the game, I don't want people to have healing cells because I don't want them to be able to heal themselves that easily. I want healing to be something that's very difficult. I've never really liked Pathfinder because, as I've discovered, it's too easy to get healed. Fourth edition destroyed the game by making it too easy to be healed. They gave you millions of hit points, and then they made it so that you could just get them all back by blinking an eye. And I don't understand that. To me, the scarcity of the game is to control your resources, and there's no resource in the game that's more important than your hit points.
Mm-hmm.
And it shouldn't be possible to just suck back, to have 12 potions in your backpack, and then you just suck back another one, and then another one, and then another one until you're up to full. That makes no sense to me. Why
Well,
would you
it's
let
too
players do
video
that?
game like, and that ruins the long game experience.
Well, how would Monopoly be if everybody at a whim, whenever they felt that they didn't have enough money, just were allowed to take $500 from the bank?
Mm-hmm.
And that this was okay up until all the money in the bank was gone, right?
Yeah.
You said the limit is when all the money in the bank is gone and then people can't take money from the bank anymore. Well, how does that improve the game in any way at all? Now we all have thousands of dollars in our pocket, and of course we're all going to reach for the bank, and pretty soon it's all going to be decided that we just divide the bank equally, so we don't start out with $1,500. We start out with a quarter of what the bank has. How has that improved the Monopoly game in any way that we now have all the money we want?
Mm-hmm.
That's stupid. Nobody would play that game. Well, nobody with any brains would play that game, and I'm sorry, I've just insulted possibly a quarter of our listeners. I don't know.
I'm sure they've heard it before.
I don't understand that thinking process. You
I think
don't want
it's the
things to
lack
be
of wanting
easy.
the fight, right? They just don't. I've played so many games where I have what feels like a bottomless pit of hit points, and then just because I've kept going, I've decided not to rest. I've decided to keep pushing. I'm getting down to, one good whack and I'm dead, right? But when you get down to that, you can easily see there's a point where you need your hit points to wane away so that you do recognize that you need to stop, that you need to reassess how you're fighting. that you need to, because you start out on the offensive and you're running in front and you're fighting and fighting and fighting. Well, if you find yourself very quickly down to your last 5 hit points, you need to pull back. But if you never find yourself down to the last 5 hit points, you never need to pull back. And I think that's what people like, because they don't want to have to pull back. They don't want to have to change their game, the way they play, the style they play. It's a cleverness level. If I only have 5 hit points left and I've got 10 orcs in front of me and I've got to get past them, I need to decide what my plan is going to be, and my plan is not going to be to run in hellbent for election, because I'm just going to get killed.
But if you have all these hit points, then you can do that every time forever.
Forever. It's very unimaginative.
Why
It's,
don't
it's
why
why I
don't
don't
they
think
get bored
people
with
like
it?
playing mages by the old rules.
Why don't they get bored with it?
I think they do get bored with it. I think that's why so many people have games that don't last that long. I'm a god, kill, kill, kill. Next time we play, kill, kill, kill. Treasure, 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 pile, pile, pile. And then they are bored and they stop playing with their group. I very often meet people who tell me that they've played, but they only really managed to play for 2 months or 3 months or maybe 6 sessions, and I think that's because they do get bored.
But they never make the connection.
Exactly.
They assume that this is how the game is supposed to run, so they never make the connection that the problem with the game isn't the game. It's
You've taken all the fight out of it.
well, the most interesting part is absolutely when you're at 5 hit points.
Oh, of course.
When
Now I got to
every
repeat
roll that
them.
I make, maybe your death,
Yeah.
and I can pause in my rolls and I can pause in my game telling, and I was playing a game just this last weekend, and at one point we were in the middle of the resurrection roll because one of the characters died, but the party had found a resurrection scroll, and they were spending time past in the middle of a combat trying to resurrect the character that had just died because they felt that they were going to need the character again before the combat was over. So they're trying to resurrect the character, and then they got the character resurrected, and I'm doing a lot of other things. And I said, well, make your roll, and they made the resurrection survival roll, and it was close. It could have gone one way or another. So I've got the book open, and I'm looking through the book, and I'm saying I could turn the pages slower. Like I could just turn this page and then I could just sit here with the book and just look at this page and not tell you whether or not the resurrection roll
Work.
worked. And oh, look, I could turn the page here and I could talk about what's on this page. Let's talk about what's on this page for a while. And of course, the players are all fucking pissed at me, right? They're all pissed at me. What are you doing? Tell us whether or not she survived. We want to know. But when somebody's down low in hit points, you can play games that support that drama, support that fear, support that I don't want to tell you right off that, you whether or not you lived or died or whether or not this guy hit or it's my turn now, but I'm holding the dice and I'm not rolling to hit because not rolling to hit only increases the tension. It doesn't make it boring because I'm not rolling to hit. I'm increasing the tension.
Well, tension is everything. The favorite running for everyone who's been playing with me for the last 10 years was a running in which we ended up free falling. And you had X number turns, I'm going to say 10 for the sake of numbers, to roll the right number to kill the monster you were fighting so that you didn't hit the ground and die. And if you didn't win, if you didn't fight the monster, you were going to hit the ground and die. And the tension at the table while everybody fought their monster, and then one person got knocked unconscious and we just about hit the ground trying to save them and fight the monster. There was so much tension because it wasn't a hit points argument. It didn't matter if you had 100 hit points. You've just fallen 1,000 feet out of the sky. You're going to hit the ground. You're going to die. And it made for very tense, very good running. Like when we all lived, which was really surprising, everybody felt very positive at the end. It was like, wow, that could have gone either way.
As I remember, to be more precise, as I remember, there was 48 rounds you had before you were going to hit the ground. Not 10, but 48, right? So that at the beginning, as I was describing what you had to go through, you had to fight this monster. You were both in the air. You're all falling. The monster was able to fly, or in some such, but you were all falling together. The monster wasn't able to fly, but it was able to control itself better.
Mm-hmm.
And if you hit the monster, you both fell away from each other, and then you both had to work to get back together again so
Yes.
that you could have another chance to hit. So that was making things last longer. But at the beginning, with the way that I'd set it up on the table, so that I was keeping track of your movement as you're getting closer to the ground. At the beginning, you're 48 rounds from the ground, so you're feeling, oh well, this is going to be a snap. This is going to be easy. We've got lots of time. But as it proved to be harder and harder and harder, and as I didn't know myself whether or not you would do it in time, and each time somebody succeeded in killing their monster, they blipped out and into another place so that they weren't falling anymore. The people who were left over who hadn't killed their monster yet were just getting closer and closer. And because of the way the die roll goes and the randomness goes, they were just getting closer and closer, and they still hadn't missed. And every time you missed, now it was getting scarier. And when you were 15 hexes away, or you were 10 hexes away, and each hex being a time closer to death, as you said, right?
Mm-hmm.
It just got freakier and freakier and freakier. And I believe your character was one hex above the ground,
Yep.
and it was the last chance you had, and it was your last roll. And if you'd blown the roll, you were dead, and if you'd succeeded the roll, you would live. And you made the roll, and everybody's watching. Everybody's hunched over the table, watching you make this last roll before your death. And you succeeded, and there was this huge cheer, and everybody survived that combat. But it was, even for the people who had flipped out, the people who were left over, it was fascinating to everybody.
Well, are you going to make it?
Are you going to
Right?
make it?
And we were in a position that there was no going back at that point. So you needed everybody to make it. You were so invested in your team because you needed everyone you had. So one person hitting the pavement was one less person helping you with the goal.
Yeah, but you all did make it.
Mm-hmm.
And the scarcity being is that you only had so many rounds, you only had so much time, and scarcity creates drama. If I don't let you buy the sword that you really want to buy, you have to get on without it. And even if you grumble and gripe because you ought to be able to buy a sword, that's sort of what we do in the real world, right? If something happens to us on a bad day and we grumble and we gripe and we bitch and we moan, I wish this hadn't happened to me. Why do I have to put up with this? Why is Skype so goddamn hard to work with, et cetera, et cetera. But then you get past that, and that's part of the process of being a person. It's part of the process of excitement, is that you have this hurdle, and once you get on the other side of that hurdle, it's the satisfaction of winning that makes the game fascinating. But if there's no hurdle to overcome because there's nothing to be lost, there's no satisfaction either, and it's just dull.
Well, yeah, you have nothing to really lose, is the best way to put it.
So I think the game should have less. You should have less options. All the development in 3E that gave you more and more and more options for your character, I think that was disastrous.
Well, yeah, you're not fighting for things in the same way. You're not expanding at need.
It's not what you can do that defines your character, it's what you can't do. If you can't do something, you have to ask for help. And if you have to ask for help, that builds up your relationship to the other characters. But if you can do it all yourself, why do you need anybody else at the table with you?
Absolutely.
Have you had that situation?
In what sense?
In a game, have you had a situation where somebody just didn't need help from anybody else?
A couple of years ago, I did a Halloween running that was intentionally just supposed to be a one evening for a lot of people who don't play D&D. So we quickly rolled up some very fast characters, and I had a friend who quite surprised me, who was much older, that got very upset that he couldn't be a particular flavor of character. And Wanting to at least let everybody have a good time. Everybody voted, yeah, let him be this character. Just he's going to have lesser roles for the sake of the game. But because he was that character and because he was so comfortable in his space as that particular character, he was a one man army. He wrecked a lot of the fun for the people who were around him. And then I just decided that because of the way the monsters would perceive it, given what they were fighting, they were taking on a mummy. When they came to the mummy, who had henchmen and other problems, I argued, a mummy's a pretty intelligent creature. I'm going to say that it's watching you throw your weight around and you're going to be its new best friend because you look like the biggest threat on the board. And it just ruined the game the minute that he couldn't just mow it over. And the fact that it was so interested in him, he couldn't go play the hero. And when he got down to about half hit points, and I mean just half for goodness sakes, he had a fit and he rage quit and left.
Because that's all it took.
Because that's all it took. And I was like, my God, you're only at half hit points. And at the time, I was running 30 people. 30. It's not like a couple people had died. Maybe I was down to 20 by that point. But it's not like he was alone. And if he had just backed off or gotten in a position where the others could help him, it would have been fine. But he'd been the hero the whole damn game. So he had decided he was going to go prove that he could fight this mummy all by himself. And when that wasn't working, he just got upset and quit.
Well, it's this rage quit stuff, right?
Yeah.
I think that's why you can buy all the potions you want and you can kill everything you want, is because people went for the rage quit. I don't want my players doing that in my world, so I'm going to give them everything they want so that they never have any reason to be mad.
Oh, if it had not been that game, if I had been legitimately playing, I would have thrown him off my table. I couldn't believe it. Right from the moment when he started to pout that he couldn't play what he wanted to play. I ran 30 people. He was older. He'd played other games before. Everybody else, because they knew it was one night, was quite happy to be like, oh, well, I didn't roll anything good, so I'll just be a fighter. And everybody was quite content. And the minute he started pouting, the minute it started to be a thing, I should have thrown him out of the game. And if it had been a legitimate D&D planning to play in future games, I would have thrown him out right then and there. Because there's just no room for that god mod crap, right?
Okay, well, I'll give a similar situation with the opposite sort of result that happened again on Saturday, as one of the characters or one of the players was allowed to roll up a henchman. So they were rolling up a new character that would be supportive of their main character. And I don't know if people know, but one of the people that I'm running in my world is my partner Tamara, and she's only learned to play D&D with me, but of course we've been together now for almost 14 years, so she's played a lot of D&D now, but she never heard of the game before coming to be with me. So she's never really had a lot of luck, you might say. She's one of the people who play who doesn't roll the best dice, and she has a little bit of that sense of superstition, so she doesn't like it if I will say something in advance. And we had a situation where she's rolling up the character, and she rolled up some incredible rolls, just fantastic rolls, a 17 and two 16s, and the character was just looking so great. And she rolled a 7. Her fifth roll was a 7, and I said, well, it's a shame, but you have really great rolls, and at least it's not a 3, right? It's nothing really devastating like a 3. And swear to God, she rolled 4 ones on 4 6-sided dice with her next roll, and she rolled a 3. It's unbelievable. She wanted to run a ranger, but you can't be a ranger with a 3 anything. And everybody felt bad about this. Everybody. It was just a complete disaster. And my first impulse, I mean, this is someone I love, and my first impulse is to say, well, let's go ahead and roll it again. And everybody at the table would have been totally in support of that. Nobody wanted this 3 to exist in the game at all. But what I did say was, well, I could do that. And you guys would all agree with it, right? And they said, yeah, we would all agree with that. And said, but where does it end? Where does it stop? When you do it one time, do you do it the next time when it's a 5? Or do you do it for you? Or like, when does it stop? We all saw the die roll. When does it stop? And they all acknowledged that, yes, that's pretty much true. Where does it stop? And Tamara made the acknowledgement that, okay, well, that's the way it is, and we're just going to figure out what to do with this character. It's not going to be a ranger. And we worked through other things and other options, and it turned out to be okay in the end, because she was forced to dig down deep and be innovative. And I think that's a much stronger way to approach misery. And if people at your table just freak out and scream at you and so on, well, why would you want them at your table? Why would you want to suck up your game to them to make them happy when ultimately that's going to deplete and destroy any chance of your game really being innovative and creative?
No, I agree. But then I always like to play the one-legged pony, and I've stated that in podcasts in the past.
I call it fetishizing the suboptimal, right?
Sure. I'll stick to my one-legged pony. It makes me seem less demonic.
Well, I've
I'm
played for
walking with fake crutches here.
I've played for so long that I wouldn't care if every stat was an 8. Like
Yeah.
to me, it really wouldn't. The stats don't really make the game. They help a lot. They're really profound and so on and so forth. If you can slam somebody with your sword really hard, that's fun and so on. But to me, it's not indicative of your ability to play the character. And I'm not a big role playing guy. I mean, I'm not interested in having long conversations with bartenders and the guy who's at the gate and whether or not I can uh, convince the guy at the store to give me a gold piece off on this piece of armor. But I am an imaginative, innovative guy, and I want to make plans and plots, and I can still do that if every character stat is an 8. I can still make a plot. I
Mm-hmm.
you what you're going to do is you're going to be my arm. Okay, you don't have any plans for your 17 or 18 strength, so um, just I'll be the brains and you be the brawn, and we'll own this town before we're done. But let me tell you how. Yeah.
Oh, well, I'll say something for the fans, but you won't get this. Everybody needs a Hodor. I'll be your Bran, and you be my Hodor. I'm so proud that I know enough about Game of Thrones that I can make that statement
Good.
accurately.
God help
So
me.
it's all I got. It's all I got. But I do my best. I'm trying to be current. Remember, I partake in reality from time to time.
I wrote a post today about followers. When you have a lot of followers, it costs you a lot of money, and that's always a good thing. Anything that costs the characters or the players a lot of money that depletes their cash.
Oh God.
And whereas I'm talking about scarcity, right? I'm not a fan of DMs who want to take all the coins away from their players because they've given too much and now they regret it. I'm not a fan of that kind of running.
Well, then it makes the running just abusive, right? I have never played a game of D&D where I'm in a town and I can't buy food. I know they're out there, and I know there are people that have so little money in their runnings that, I mean, maybe I can't buy great food, I'll buy that one. But I have seen runnings where there's just so fucking little money that we can't buy food. And it's like, what is the purpose of this? How is this helping me? This is just slowing down gameplay for the sake of slowing down gameplay. Is your plan to play in a world where there's lots of food and I just stand here and cry at it? Is that the goal?
The problems of overscarcity,
Yeah.
and you don't like it.
Well, it's not, it's fine when it's justified. You're in a desert and you've hit a lot of small towns and there's not a lot of food. You've been adventuring too long and not hitting any payoffs because you keep running away from dungeons. That's going to start to hurt you financially. But when I've been playing dungeon after dungeon after dungeon to its core, and I haven't found a piece of treasure or some gold or anything, I feel like we've lost the plot. I mean, the fundamental argument should be I am totally obsessed with treasure. Why do I campaign? Why am I a D&D person? Well, I went on to be a hero so that I didn't have to be a farmer. So I
Even
don't
though
want to
there's
be paid like a farmer.
even though there's scarcity, there has to be reward.
Absolutely.
And I agree with that. I mean, I don't feel that the scarcity has to be applicable to keeping people from going up a level or making people pay ludicrous amounts of money every time they do go up a level. I'm all for people being able to go up a level every 4 or 5 runnings, if at all possible. But at the same time, once you've come out of the dungeon and you've had that tremendous hit, I don't want it to suddenly be easy, because if there's no reason to go back into a dungeon, or the motivation is, I mean, players who are wandering around with their pockets full of 50, 60, 80,000 gold pieces, then something has to be come up with that will siphon that huge amount of cash out of their pockets. But what I was talking about was DMs who are saying, well, you're carrying around all this gold. The thief, you didn't see him, but a thief popped out of the bushes and he stole everybody's money, and now you're all broke again.
Oh, the abusive system.
I've seen that game. I've been in that game. I've been that person who's, you think you're getting on top, and then the DM's like, oh no, look, you know, you guys didn't notice it, but everything you had was taken away from you by a thief, or you're sitting on the side of the road. You've just bedded down for the night. The army shows up, and there's 200 of them, and I'm sorry, we're plundering all of your equipment because we're supporting ourselves and we're going off to war. So everything you own is now ours. And what are you going to do? You're going to fight 200 guys? So
I don't like things that are unjustified, where it feels like the DM is just robbing players. The only game I played that did anything similar, but it made sense, was I played a game where they had just done a lot of adventuring. They came into town with literal barrels of gold, and then just started to spend it very publicly. And then they were beaten up and robbed. And it was like, yes, well, that might happen. And nobody felt surprised when, and it wasn't even the whole party, it was part of the party, was robbed. Was, well, yeah, you came in with barrels of gold, and while you were prying them open and throwing money at the town, somebody went, oh, look, a barrel,
I still think it's a little too convenient. And it might be rational, but I think that's still a little too convenient. Why not let the character keep the money? I think it's much better to find something to spend the money on than it is to just try to take it away from them by any means at all.
No, I agree. Let them spend it. Don't try to find opportunity to rob your players, because then there's no reward. I went through all that dungeon and now I'm broke again. And it doesn't make you want to go back in a dungeon. It makes you want to stop playing.
Yeah, and I think that that's what happens most of the time. So there is a bad side to scarcity. I mean, you can't have too much of it, and you can't have scarcity that seems unfair or unbelievable because you're going to challenge your character. So you have to be very careful with how you're making that scarcity occur. You've got to make sure that there's still a carrot in front of them that they can smell and that they can occasionally get their teeth on. So that carrot's got to be close and it's got to be there, and it's got to, they've got to be able to eat one. But at the same time, if there's no carrot at all, if the donkey's just sitting there in a pile full of carrots, then the donkey's not going to pull the cart.
My fiance and I are probably the two richest people in the game.
My game, yeah.
Yeah. And
that's because your fiance doesn't spend money on anything.
That's true.
He never spends money on anything.
In the game and in the real world. Why would he break his value system? That doesn't make any sense.
He's not interested in buying any houses. He's not interested in buying any heavy equipment. He doesn't buy any wagons or carts to help you guys move along. It's hard to convince him to even buy a horse. He only will if he absolutely has to. And then he doesn't care about the horse. He doesn't have any relationship with the horse. He'd be happy to butcher it by the side of the road. That's how much he cares about the horse. Your fiance is a munchkin. And there's nothing I can do about that except accept that there's one of them in my world and that he saves the party from time to time. So that's a good thing.
But at least he's not. At least he's incredibly consistent, and he's not spending it. It's not like he's suddenly going to flood the market and make real trouble. He's not going to do it. But finally, when he got to the point that he had to outfit his characters, because he got followers as well. I got followers first. And that hurt my money, because you're putting armor on everybody and feeding everybody and housing everybody. And it's just going to hurt your money. And he had the same thing. He finally got to the point that he got a big influx of followers. And even though they're thieves and they don't wear armor, he has to feed them.
Yeah, it's lots to feed. It's lots to house. He's got to support them, and wait till, it is a thieves guild. So wait until he has to bail them out of jail, because that's going to happen. I'm going to do that because they're a thieves guild, and that's part of the process. There is no such thing as a thieves guild that doesn't also have lawyers for hire and bribes to be made.
And that's it, is that eventually you're going to hit some point in the game where money needs to be spent. I run the town, so I spend all my money on the town, but I've seen people, other players with us, have lots of carts, to move equipment, ballistas, trebuchets, to defend the town. These things aren't free, right?
Well,
And
you're
they
an
can
eighth
have a
level.
lot of costs.
You're an eighth level ranger. You've got what, 15, 17 followers, something like that.
Followers, I think I've got 12, but total characters, I've got 28.
Yeah, there you go. Henchmen of henchmen of henchmen of henchmen.
Mm-hmm.
And we're talking to a crowd that can't imagine that you're running a character that has 16 personal characters that are fanatic to you, so you basically can run them at will. I don't have any say in what they do or say. They can throw themselves in front of a dragon for you if that's what you want them to do. So that's very strange for people. They can't understand that. And that certainly goes against any idea of scarcity because you have so many people to pick from.
And so many people to feed, and so many fucking people who need clothing. And if I leave them naked in the woods, they'll die. It's like a terrible pet.
And I charge you for their housing and other things as well.
Exactly. They're lovely and they're nice to have, don't get me wrong. But they are followers, and they're just fans, and they are more work and more effort and more money.
And your character sheet's now a binder that you keep all of these other people in, and it's almost completely unwieldy.
Yeah.
There's many
You
people.
don't have to play them all. I mean, I say that just because I think people are listening to this and they think it's a requirement. My fiance's Thieves Guild has all the thieves in it, but he's left them at home in a kind of a stable setup where they eat and live and do. He doesn't proactively play them at this point. I proactively play maybe 4 of them at a time. I am not marching 27 men around, and I think the most I ever did was run 16 of them, but we were in a very large space where I could do that, and it almost killed me.
Well, that was that big campaign that we had where everybody ran every character that they had. So there was 60 people in the combats until attrition began to just, wean out the people who couldn't survive. But
it was very, for context, it was very turn keep like. It was a space that you could bring 60 people into and operate.
And then just steadily clean out the series of
everything.
Dungeons that I had created for that.
Yeah.
I was going to say, it's slipped my gear. Before running happens, or before an adventure happens, if you guys are all at home and everybody has their characters, right now you're all split up and running in different parts of the world. There's one group in Poland, and there's another group in Romania, and there's another group that's now in southern Morocco. But when you guys all come together and you're setting up for the next series of campaigns, you all go home and you gather and you talk. Everybody says, well, I'm going to take this person and this person and this person in the next campaign. And there's a deliberate decision to do that. The high-level guys are all going to go here, and the middle-level guys are all going to go here, and the low-level guys are all going to go here. And then I wind up running 3 different campaigns, and if you're bored with what's going on in Poland, we can go to the southern Morocco party and run them for a while, and when I'm not ready to run them, we can go back to Poland.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody really likes that. It gives them an opportunity to play lots of different characters, and at the same time, they're not stuck in one single environment. And I have time to say, I'm going to need more time to prepare this section, so let's go run this other party for a while. It means I don't have to run the same campaign forever, even if I'm not prepared for it.
Well, and it gives us what's best known as like a noob pool system or a noob gate, so that we have somewhere for the lesser characters to run in easier running. Right now our weaker characters are in Poland. They're not doing anything particularly challenging. We have our own fights, of course, but it's not like if I was hauling my 1st level guy around with my 9th level guy, which is much more challenging. You can't really take, you as a 9th level character, it is not a good idea to take your 8 1st level guys with you, because then you're babysitting 90% of the time.
And they're sucking treasure out of your pockets.
Yeah, and you need the money. You do need the money, because your armor breaks, something happens to something you own, and it's much more expensive to repair my armor than it is to put leather on a 1st level guy.
And if somebody new comes to the campaign, I can run them in the smaller, lower level group so that they can get the sense. And then even though you have all of this coin and all of this money and all of this power, because all of you guys together are basically a government, but even if you have all of this power, if your henchmen go off onto this separate campaign to all be first and second and third level characters. For a while, you get to experience again what it was like to be weak.
Well, yeah, when your highest guy is a fourth level character and the maximum hit points in the party are 30.
And the new person that comes to play every other session or some such, they get to start with characters that aren't ninth level.
Mm-hmm.
So that they can be with somebody who's maybe a little bit higher than them, but not that much higher, and then they can feel more like a part of the group.
Yeah.
It's really weird. I mean, I don't want anybody not to start at first level. And in another way, that's the scarcity thing, right? All of these people who are 9th or 10th or 11th level, they've campaigned for literally years to get to be that level. And I don't want to give that free to somebody else. I want them to strive and feel pain and suffer to get that level, because to me, it's irrational not to make them suffer. They won't appreciate it, and they won't enjoy getting there, and they won't develop their character if you just make them. And for somebody who hasn't had that much experience at D&D, they won't know what the hell to do with all the abilities you give them if you start them off at 7th level.
We always have struggled with taking a non-RPG role player, non-tabletop gamer, and they'll express that they want to try D&D, but it's so challenging to explain to them that even at first level, you got a big learning curve for a while. And they go, well, I want to be 5th level now. And you're like, you don't even know what your 3 spells do. Okay, you can't be 5th yet. You're not ready.
And I think that's brilliant. I think that the system itself, forcing people to become adapted to more and more abilities as they move forward, is a brilliant way of introducing someone to the game. And I think that the desire to circumvent it, once again, to keep Joe Bob from losing his shit during the game because, oh, I'm a first level and everybody around me is 5th. This isn't fair. Why does Joe Bob think that fair means he gets to have everything that everyone else earned? Why does that make sense to Joe Bob? It makes no sense to me.
I wouldn't like it if everyone who became a doctor was somebody who was upset that they didn't get accepted to medical school.
Well, there's always that, yeah.
Something about that makes me uncomfortable. I don't know why.
Well, I think it's a fantasy element, right? There is this strong fantasy thing that says, this is my fantasy, I should be able to have whatever my fantasy is. And I think they're confusing fantasy game with laying back in your bed and imagining what life would be if you had $10 million and you were attractive. And I think they're confusing those two things as though they're the same thing. And sometimes you have to, clarify them of that error in thinking.
No, I agree.
They walk into your world and they think, oh, I'm entitled to everything because this is my fantasy. Isn't the name of this thing fantasy campaign? I don't get it. Why aren't I allowed to do everything I want? Maybe fantasy was not a good word to choose to describe role-playing games in the first place. No thoughts on that?
No, I'm deciding what my thoughts are.
Thinking it through.
I'm thinking that through. I immediately went into a headspace where I started thinking about people I've played with over the years and the attitude of this is all for me. And I've never looked at this game that way. I've never stopped and thought this is all for me. I've thought of it like Monopoly. I've thought, let us all sit down and enjoy a rousing game of kill your friends. No, maybe not that.
No player versus player, but yeah. There's just one friend represented by the DM who conveniently puts everything in front of you that you can kill. Yeah. Okay, we're with you. We're on the same page.
But I've always looked at it as something that is a great fantasy environment game, not a fantasy lifestyle game.
Well, fundamentally, it's a game.
Yes.
And games operate on what you can't have and trying to get what you can't have. They don't operate on here's everything up front. Now do whatever you want because it's magic. That's not how games tend to operate successfully. Baseball is a very difficult game. You have to actually stand there while somebody hurls an object at you at a pretty high speed, and you have to try to hit it. And if you don't succeed in hitting it, you may hate baseball. You may not want to play baseball. but it would be ridiculous for somebody to say, I get to run the bases because baseball would be more fun to me if I didn't have to hit the ball first. And who would say that? Who would even begin to think on that level?
Because it's
And
not the game.
who would change the rules of baseball in order to make that possible? Apparently, it's because baseball wasn't something that the WOTC could run or could pay, right?
This is true. That it's
Uh,
one of the few things I don't think they can afford to buy.
I was told, just an aside, I was told that nobody in Seattle refers to the WOTC that way. Okay, you have to think of the O and the T as small. Okay, so that they call it what C.
That's bizarre.
That it's not the WOTC, it's the what C. That's what I was told online.
I don't know. I think I like WOTC, and I will explain why. Because usually I'm prepared to accept the thing that is not normal. Is that it sounds more abusive when I say it in a dirty context. Because if I go the freaking whatsy, that doesn't work as good as the freaking WOTC. You know, like because I can slow it down, I can take it in.
Well, I to me it sounds more like an evil organization if you call it the WOTC, right? It sounds like
Yeah,
it,
like big towers and lightning and ominous music.
or perhaps a trade union that really isn't doing its freaking job, right? Bunch of fat cats around promising that they're going to do something and not doing it, right? So that it sounds more officious and less feeling and less considerate and less kind.
The whatsy goes to a terrible Japanese place where it has big eyes and it's some sort of evil mascot. And not that I don't recognize that it's also being a good placement holder. It's just not the same.
As long as it gets to be the Japanese boy that's screaming that he doesn't get what he wants and he's stamping his feet, and it doesn't get to be the Japanese girl with the big sad eye that everybody feels sorry for. I'm all right with it being anime as long as we have that
Right
characterization down, right?
It's got to be the right anime.
Absolutely. Do you have any last things to say about scarcity that you want to throw in here?
No, actually, I weirdly feel like we covered it, and I barely fought with you. Weird. We agree.
Well, we almost always agree about D&D, which is terrible for these podcasts. We really need to be get into screaming matches with each other where you call me stupid and you point out why my DMing is so bad and that no sane person would pay me for it and that kind of thing. That's what you want.
I like your DMing. I hate you as a player because you're better than me, and it's no fun.
Haha, I'm better than everybody.
I watch you play and you piss me off because I'll be sitting there trying to do something and you'll do something stupid and you'll be like, oh, that's fucking brilliant. Damn it. I've fucking had that so many times with you. I'm trying to figure out how to do something. And you're like, I toss a beat to see if it's a trap. And you're like, I feel so stupid. I didn't do that. Damn it.
Yeah, the beat thing, right? Did we talk about the beat thing in a previous podcast?
I don't think we have.
It was something I was doing in your worlds. Beats are cheap and they're soft. That's one of the brilliant things about them, and they float, right? Unlike stones and rocks and so on and so forth. So, the first time that I ran in the campaign that you were running, I picked up a bag of beats, so I had about a dozen of them, and then when I wanted to check a hallway ahead of time, I would throw a beat down the hallway and see how that went. And Tamara was running in a series of campaigns. I wasn't in them, but she had some time on Wednesday nights, and so she was down at the Sentry Box, and she was playing with total strangers that she ultimately didn't much like, but she had a couple of friends, so they were all playing together, and this came up, and Tamara threw a beat down a hallway, and everybody was so impressed. They thought this was just the greatest idea ever. That
Quickly, everyone is throwing beats.
And now I understand that at the Sentry Box, at all the tables, people are throwing beats down hallways because.
I remember when it happened, and just going, "Damn it, that's smart."
It's nice and soft. You can hear when it hits in the water, And if it's floating in the water there and nothing's eating it, then you're pretty sure that there's nothing in the water, right? Because it's going to float on top of the water, and then if something wants to eat it.
I hate it because it's brilliant. I don't hate it because you're good.
And of course, it's also a good thing to leave a mark in a hallway because you cut it in half, and it's makes a red mark and so on. So it's much more reliable than a piece of chalk because you can scratch things out on hallways and so on, and messages, and point the way, and so on and so forth. So I think it's just a terrific method for identifying things. So that's the whole beat story.
Did you learn that, or did you make that up?
I totally made that up.
God, I just hate you.
It comes out of the trade system because I've learned so much things about so many objects in the world. And I never even, before I started the trade system back in my 20s, I didn't even know that sugar came from beets. I didn't even know that people pressed beets to make sugar. I had no idea. I didn't know that in all of the rest of the world, they don't call them beets. They call them sugar beets. Nobody in Europe calls it a beet. It's a
No,
sugar
it's
beet.
a sugar beet.
And
Yeah.
and I didn't even know that before the trade system. So it has me thinking about stuff that I would never ever have thought about. So yeah, that was totally off the cuff,
I
completely
think
off
I
the
think
cuff.
there's a lot to be said, and I want to say this just because I want to, that the more you learn about weird items in game is so helpful. I play with so many people that do a lot of just general reading that will come up with something in a game like the beads or some kind of wax or some kind of system just from knowing more about the items in the inventory that's really helped. I mean, I know a lot about fabric, but I've known other people that know a lot about wax or know a lot about oil, what you can do, what you can't do. It's very helpful.
And I think the game has the room for it. That the innovation and the chance to find out something. I mean, these guys who made the game back in the 70s, they really weren't that well educated. There really wasn't that much that was at their fingertips. They kind of lucked out in creating a system that was this flexible. But then they rushed around and did their best to make that system as inflexible as possible by trying to make rules about things that should never have been hammered
Rules.
down. They should never. But there are so many. I mean, you can go back and you can look at the original books and so on, and it's quite clear that these guys really didn't know anything about, say, insanity, or that it was clear they didn't know anything about what you would pay people to do things for a living, like hirelings and so on. Like those hireling numbers really don't make any sense. Just there's a lot of things along those lines.
Hmm.
It's quite clear that these guys were pulling a lot of this game out of their ass. It was just chance and luck that they followed the right path. But I also argue that there's all sorts of indications of role-playing games that came out, role-playing games and ideas that came out in the 1960s that basically these guys going to university were cheek and jowl with. There's no way that these guys didn't have a conversation with someone who was doing role-playing games in psychology classes, because role-playing was becoming such a huge psychology excitement factor. Like everybody was doing it. You've got to do this. You've got to. Hey, come down. We're gonna have a night where we're all gonna role play in the psych thing. You guys got to come out. And people going away for weekends to do nothing but role play for the weekend. You're gonna be my mother, and I'm gonna be your son. And we're just gonna play that out like role playing. I mean, this was huge in psychology through the late '60s.
Yeah.
You can see it in movies like Bob and Carol and Ted and Alice. You can read it in books like I'm Okay, You're Okay. There were people who were spending 24 hours trapped in rooms where they were induced and pushed to the point where they would scream at each other or they would hug. And
Yeah, I read about a place where I think it was in Ohio in 1971 where you could go and be a barnyard animal for
exactly,
two
exactly.
days.
And it was healthy for you. You'd break free. Okay, there was a series of things called EST, and I can't remember what that stands for, but it was this guy, and he invented all these groups, and it was just to get middle class people to break free from their very tiny, tiny perspective of the world. This was huge, primal screaming and all that other stuff. And this is the world that these guys were living in when they made Dungeons and Dragons. This is the place they were coming from. This is the social livelihood that they were coming out of. It wasn't out of their brains just from scratch. They came from this place where other people were already doing these things for fun and for personal health and psychology and so on. So there were all these things that were already on the table. All they did was put what would have been in their subconscious minds into the game itself. I mean, and basically, if I take any two objects that are on a board, you're going to impress them with thought. How many games did you play of Risk, where the one army that's still left on Mongolia that survived the combat, that you don't give that one army a personality?
Yeah.
That 10-year-old kids aren't saying, the captain of my one army. I mean, we're talking about a little plastic object sitting on a table, and the 10-year-old is saying, well, my army stands there and it thumbs its nose at you and it tells you that, you're never going to take us. And they you give it dialogue, you give it personality, and that's all you're doing with the original rules of chainmail. That's
You're the
all.
last one alive. You get a name.
Yeah, that's all they did with that. So I don't really think that they were that smart a bunch of guys. I think what they did in the '70s with D&D was inevitable, and I don't really kowtow to them the way that other people do in this community where, oh God, the great God Gygax, the world would never have been. I think that's a bunch of shit. I think that a lot of people were working on it at the same time, and he just happened to be the one that ran down to the office to put it under his name. And that's all it was. But that's an unpopular point of view, and I can't stop saying it because I really enjoy it.
I want to say it. I want to tattoo it across my arm. Yeah, I'm with you. I understand. I have my grinds too, right? Yours is Gygax and mine is Bob Fosse. So everybody's got one.
No, you're supposed to argue with me. You're supposed to call me a loser, and you're supposed to tell me that I don't really understand the contribution that these people gave to the game, and that I have the benefit of hindsight and all this other stuff. You're not supposed to let me get away with this thing.
My elementary school teacher, whose name I won't mention because I don't think he would like it, if he's still even alive, he was one of the guys who worked with Gygax on the game that Gygax shut out. And when I was 10, where he had been credited for work in the books, but not as the prints later stopped being TSR, he was no longer credited because they didn't have to credit him for the work. And I think it even stopped being printed after the first few rounds of printing. But he was one of the people that Gygax shut out. And you just look at something like D&D and you think there wasn't enough money. You were so worried about this one guy, and that will always paint my image of Gygax and his work. So.
Well, that was always a story, right? Because I knew that fellow. I knew your elementary teacher because I had played Empire of the Petal Throne with him in 1979, just like months after I began running role-playing games. He was the DM and he was running Empire of the Petal Throne, and it was so funny when I came to see him for a parent-teacher interview, and it turned out he was my previous DM, and we just laughed and laughed and laughed about that. So,
Yeah.
and I knew him, and yeah, you're right. He probably wouldn't prefer us mentioning his name on this podcast. Oh well, we should wrap this up. We've stopped talking about scarcity and we're just babbling now. So
we're providing flavor context. So that's what we'll call it.
For all of you out there who have listened, this is the longest podcast that we've done so far, I believe. Listen, my name is Alexis Smolensk. I run a blog, and if you've enjoyed this, you can support these podcasts. And you can also support my efforts to improve role-playing games through reading my blog, The Tao of D&D, at Blogspot. You can follow the links there that will take you to my wiki, which has over 900 pages in it, or read my books. I have 3 books that I have written on the subject of D&D, and I am planning some tutorials for how to run as a dungeon master that will be run on Skype. And if you want to help me in any other way, you can leave a donation on my blog or support my Jumpstarter campaign. And you can find details about that on my blog as well. So thank you all. Thank you, my daughter.
Hi, guys. Thank you. Sorry about the Skype.
And sorry about all my nasty comments about the holy founders of Dungeons and Dragons. So everybody take care and goodbye.